Redditors, we all have that one friend who always seeks attention using made up stories. What's the dumbest thing that she came up to impress everybody, but failed dramatically? Not really a friend, but apparently that girl makes up her life. The most well known is when she apparently came up to her friend's house one evening, saying she can't go home because her friend Miss Tahiti is resting there because she had a rough day, and she doesn't want to disturb her. New employee got hired for a food manufacturer. First day he starts telling stories about his life. He was in the army and the D wanted him to run the border patrol. His mother was a doctor that wrote books about him only sleeping 1 hour a night. He was hired by the FDA to spy on this facility, yet told everyone he was a FDA spy, reported hurting his shoulder and would lie to his co-workers his restrictions. The notes I was receiving from doctors said no concerns could be found. The list just keeps going. Back in the late 90s when Xena was still airing and popular, attention-seeking friend, guys, I interviewed Reno Connor. The rest of the friend group, who's that? Attention-seeking friend, she plays Gabrielle on Xena. The rest of the friend group, isn't her name Renee? Attention-seeking friend, oh, yeah, of course. I interviewed Renee O'Connor. Back in the 90s I was on a very famous TV show. Said she went to Alaska over the 2-day weekend. We live in Belize, Google it. My friend actually does this. He works for an airline though, so he gets free flights. Oh dear, I was this kid once. Life in my home was really bad and it didn't help that I was the quiet type, since speaking up in my home was a capital offense, so kids either laughed behind my back or in my face. So I kinda developed a need for lying about how cool my parents are and what cool stuff we do together because I was jealous of them. I grew out of it, but sometimes I still lie about my childhood since it is not exactly a good bomb to drop on a casual conversation. In my experience, most people who make up stories are very dissatisfied with their real life and don't know how to get out. It is especially a big red flag when a kid does it. Best case scenario, he just wants attention. Worst case scenario, his real life is too traumatizing to cope in any other way than imagining it isn't real. Yeah, this thread makes me a little sad, especially the kids who tell lies because the truth is too painful. I appreciate you bringing this up for a different perspective. That he convinced a fairly popular band, at least in my country, that making music for profit is unethical. Since I told them that music shouldn't be about profit, they haven't released a new album. Think about it. My old college roommate was telling his friends how he got kicked out of class that day. The girl sitting next to me said, "Are you a wrestler? I've heard you guys have great bodies, so I took my shirt off in class. The professor told me to put it back on immediately or I would be asked to leave. So I took my pants off and flipped the professor off on my way out. I truly wish I was exaggerating." Said he got a brand new pickup truck, drove down south, this is in Wisconsin, to pick up said brand new pickup truck, drove it back over the weekend but crashed it on the way back, and that's why he doesn't have the brand new pickup truck to show us. Last time we saw him, he had claimed he had cancer, then suddenly ghosted out. Ends up he told his boss he had cancer and borrowed a couple grand from the guy and skipped out of town. Also he claimed that he was doing drafting at that job, but he was dumb as a box of rocks and had no drafting experience, and I'm pretty sure he was just a construction grunt. Not that there's anything wrong with working construction. Later on in life my buddy went on a trip to Ireland for a week, hooked up with a girl there and posted candid pics of the two of them hanging out on island and some random sightseeing pics on Facebook. Dude steals my buddy's vacation pics, including the pics of the girl, and posts them to his new vacation in Ireland photo album along with captions like "met this great girl while in Ireland." Also, for the longest time he told us he had a hot blonde girlfriend from out of state, and when he finally showed us a pic of her it was literally a zoomed in, cropped pic of a vagina. Like, just the vag. LOL. I made up a dumb story about embarrassing my kids into not playing Fortnite in front of their whole school and posted it to Reddit twice in about 8 months, where I was gilded about 12 times for it. I don't even have kids. I was an exchange student in Texas. Me and my brother went coyote hunting with some of our mutual friends all night at 6 AM, and after a night of no coyotes, I decided to sleep. I woke up an hour later because they destroyed my tent as a prank. The next day in school, He tells people how he had been sitting at the fire, and all of a sudden, a cougar sat on a branch above him, growling at him. He said that he had been looking at it and it then ran away. I knew he was lying, because he was constantly lying to his family and stealing money from their wallets, including mine at one point, which he never admitted. I just stopped him in his cougar story and said that I had been awake the whole night and heard nothing, and the other said the same. He just looked at me like I had betrayed him. Why make crap up just to sound interesting? Years ago, just after I started working in my local youth project, we had a 12-year-old girl who was adamant that she was a mermaid and her legs would fuse together in the bath to make a tail. The other teens avoided her like the plague because she was also a bit too clingy and would try and insert herself into a group like she was best mates with everybody. Lots of other fantastical claims. We made a referral to social services. Turned out that she had a mild learning disability and was also batshit crazy and under the Children's Mental Health Service. That's kinda sad. OMG, had a friend that told so many lies it's impressive how unaware she is that it was easy to find out. Once she told us she has a boyfriend who was based in Vancouver. PS. We're Southeast Asians. Okay, cool, maybe she does have then. She even changed her time zone on her phone to be the same as Vancouver. She went on to say that he asked her to Google 143 and it was him with an I love you sign to her. We googled 143 and found no dude with a sign whatsoever. We even peeked sometimes at her phone to see who she's texting, but a lot of the time it was an unsaved number with our country code. Another time told me she's going San Francisco. Told her to get some games for me cause it's cheaper there. She even called me telling me she's looking for them. She never uploaded pictures of San Francisco, and when I asked her about the games she said she couldn't find it. I asked if I could get a souvenir then, like maybe an American dollar bill. She apparently doesn't have that either. Yikes. I'm actually the one who makes up crap. It's a really bad thing I can't control very well. I just lie all the time for no reason. I convinced my whole high school that I wrote rap lyrics for a very small rapper. I'm waiting for the day when someone finds out and makes fun of me for the rest of my life. I convinced my whole high school that I wrote rap lyrics for a very small rapper. Nobody believed you. They knew all along and nobody ever confronted you because they didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of seeing you fumble to try to defend your lies. During summer break a couple of years ago, she started texting a friend of us that she was at a hospital because and had been diagnosed with lung cancer and needed to be operated and treated immediately. She then told us that she met a boy at the cancer center of the hospital who became her boyfriend and got transferred to her room because the nurses thought it was such a sweet story. While she was in surgery, she had her boyfriend keep texting us and telling us details about everything that was going on. He told us that she went into cardiac arrest and then in a coma. My other friend's mom ended up calling her mom and asked if there was anything we could do and how things are looking RN. It turns out she was healthy at home and just bored. Okay, so this was in the 6th grade. There was this one kid who was the basic definition of our thathappened. So my friend and I were talking about life and his story went like this. So, one time, I got an level 2 demerit, so I punched the teacher in the face. She then told me I was going to detention, so I ran. I ran upstairs and the police were right behind me. I got to the roof and there was a helicopter there. I then flew the helicopter and went home. My other friend and I were just dumbfounded that someone can make up that big of a story in 6th grade. Not exactly a story she made up, but when we were around 12 we were in school and her and her crush, we were all fixing up the library and she swore she could twerk and showed us, but all she was doing was wiggling her butt. Her crush was uncomfortable as heck and so was I. He fought a heavyweight MMA champion for 10 rounds in front of a large crowd. He is the weakest man I know. 180 centimeters 50 kilograms. A walking twig basically. He told stuff like this all the time. She was being stalked by and strangled, assaulted by a ghost who liked to write on the walls in blood. Now, I was 12 and into spirits, and at first I believed her when it was just her talking about objects being tossed around and hearing footsteps. When it got to the point where he was strangling her and she decided to spend 15 minutes of ghost strangling time live blogging it to me over IM, I wised up and just humored her after that. The writing blood on the wall thing happened after we fell out over her lying, manipulation, attention seeking, and got her laughed out of the forum we both posted on. my friend doesn't completely lie, but greatly exaggerates stories. When we were teens she definitely made up stories, but nowadays she just exaggerates the heck out of what she tells you. She likes to portray herself as a computer gamer to her online fans. So when she got a PS4, the father of her children bought it for their kids. She posted online that she actually bought her first system and how crazy it was. Not only did she grow up with NES and SNES, but she also had a PS2 when we were in our late teens early 20s that we used to play quite a bit. I called her out on it, though I usually don't because she just gets mad at me, plus she does this sort of thing so often that I'd be calling her out constantly. One time she told some people that she just met that she was a singer after they asked if she played any instruments, which wasn't completely false considering she took singing lessons for a short period. But she's not a good singer at all and has never sang in a band or anything even close to that at all. A singer in her bedroom? Sure. I worked with a colleague who made up some really incredible stories. Here are a selection. 1. Her house burned down but she managed to rescue her 2 dogs. 2. She was thrown in a jail in Mexico because she was taking pictures of a slum and the police said she couldn't and she won't hand over her camera to them. 3. During a thunder and lightning storm her computer got blown up upstairs and the TV downstairs both at the same time. 4. She resuscitated a man back to live during a church service. 5. She had a peanut and fish allergy, even though I saw her regularly eat tuna sandwiches. 6. She got a tip off that drugs were being sold on our premises and managed to persuade the premises manager to get a sweep of the building done. Nothing was found. These are just a selection of the many stories. She doesn't work here anymore and in a weird way I miss the crazy tales. No longer friends with this lassie, but her most absurd lie was that her dad owned the Thames, as in the river that runs right through London. After some pressing by us she admitted he doesn't own the whole thing, of course, just a wee bit of it. There was some dude in my class who said that his house was burned down by Black Lives Matter activists. He took a picture from inside his house almost a week later. Lying 100. I have a very impressive friend. He is a stunt man. You've seen him in Marvel movies but don't know it. He's doubled for some well-known actors. He's 6 feet 0 inches and a wall of muscle. He looks like a football player but he can do backflips, wire work. He's been into martial arts since he was 5. I love him to death. I really hate how reality is never good enough for him. He could tell his very real, very cool, everyday stories, but instead he's in his own head telling it like his life is actually an action move, where he does stuff like jump onto the hoods of cars to save people having heart attacks. This is a 30-year-old man who, if he has to wait for you, will climb a tree because he still wants to be a ninja. It's not like he's stupid. He got a bachelor's in mathematics, but his imagination always has the best of him. He's been shot in drive-bys a half a dozen times. He's had acute sudden onset pancreatitis where all his organs failed and he needed transplants and everyone's like, dude, we know you were just traveling for work. Stop. She told us she was graduating college and got accepted into law school. I knew she was infamous for making things up, so I asked if I could go to her graduation and she said she was out of tickets. This particular university does not give graduation tickets. You could have an unlimited amount of guests attend since it's held at an arena. It turns out she never went to college. She was graduating from a trade school for medical billing. She later said she got hired as a teacher, but doesn't even have an associate's degree. Some college graduations give out tickets. I was given 4 and petitioned for 2 more so my grandparents could come but was denied. Had a friend tell me he actually saw UFO land in his backyard. He gave details like little flashing lights on it, the smooth round metal on the craft and the smoke pouring out beneath it before it shot off at the speed of light into the night sky and left burnt marks on the grass. Could be a neat short story but he was adamant it happened. I asked him when he saw it and he said back on Saturday. The previous Saturday I'd been over at his house for a sleepover and he never saw that, nor were there burn marks on the lawn. He made up a bunch of other ridiculous stories, so one time, to fully convince myself, before said UFO story, I asked him something like, remember the time that, insert wild, fake story, happened? He said yes, and in the back of my mind I thought that's interesting because that never happened. Oh man, where do I start? Recently he told everyone he was moving to Daytona Beach. from the Midwest into a 6-figure job, and he has never held a legit job for over a year. The most recent thing is getting kicked out of his house that he once told us was his and he was paying mortgage on, but now is his dad's, and his dad is kicking him out to rent it to his sister. Needless to say, nothing has happened and it's all a bunch of bulls. There's an unlimited amount of stories. My ex-boyfriend had a scar on his stomach that he told me was from a fight where he got stabbed. His friends had told me that he used to get into fights a lot, so I bought it. After meeting his mom, she told me that it was from a surgery to remove a hernia when he was born. Not the last lie I caught him telling, but definitely the dumbest. My ex-friend has a whole slew of stories about her. From the time she almost got us in a car with a serial killer and a little person to the time she became possessed and just shouted the words gobbledygook over and over to show she was speaking in tongues. By far her worst one was what she said after a friend of ours had a very serious sexual attack. We will call the good friend Betsy and the attention-seeking friend Ally. So Betsy had sat down in our group after looking very shaken up. We had all planned to meet up today and Betsy hadn't confirmed if she'd be there or not, but we were all glad to see her. 2 days prior to this, Betsy had been walking to her car from work and was sexually assaulted. Almost raped, but she fought her attacker off. Everyone was being very careful to not trigger her, and when she finally broke down, none of us were surprised. We offered her shoulders, tissues and comfort. Well unhappy about the attention not being on her and her latest sexual escapade, Ally decided to speak up. I was raped too, you know. Now normally I'd not think twice about such a claim because who would like or joke about such a thing? Regardless, Ally decided to continue. Yep, I was raped. Like in my car. Last night. Now Betsy was full blown shaking. Tears falling and becoming their own rainstorm, and here is Ally being smug as we all turned to look at her with shock. None of us knew what to say. Till I spoke up while holding Betsy. Ally, did you call the police? Why didn't you say anything earlier? Then a very good friend spoke up. B, you weren't raped last night. You and I ran out for a pizza. You found a hookup waiting at a red light and pulled over to get your eggs scrambled. Imagine your sassiest gay friend saying that and you got exactly what was said. Cause turns out Ally and our good gay friend had actually been hanging out all weekend. Not unusual for our group to spend days or weeks together at the time. Ally tried to say it was after they got back home, but good gay friend wasn't having it. Oh, I know you ain't saying I did the nasty witchy girl. I am as gay as a banana is yellow. Ally attempted once more, but none of us were having it. She stormed off shouting if you all were real friends you'd believe me over some little gay pecker. Yeah, needless to say, not a lot of people still hang around Ally. I was in college and a kid I knew used to pepper his everyday conversations with sensational stories. He was a 3rd degree black belt or something in Taekwondo and even had his belt hanging up. I'm not sure what his dojo was, but apparently it is the one where they give out belts made of nylon camera straps. But the one I took the most joy in its sheer ridiculousness was he went to a Starbucks for a coffee. While getting his coffee, a tow truck driver pulled up in the parking lot and decided to tow his car for no good reason. When he went outside and saw his car all hooked up, he approached the driver, who then tried to start some crap. So he roundhoused the tow truck driver and knocked him out. So then he got in his car and drove to work. The story fails on so many levels it was just not worth even approaching. Had a co-worker named Mike who was a compulsive liar. He always had grandiose war stories. He was actually military, but claimed to have all these medical issues from stepping on an IED in Iraq to save his unit, a broken back, bad hips, metal plates to completely reconstruct his foot. We worked in a retail clothing store which allowed open-toed shoes. He'd wear flip-flops in the summer. His feet and legs were completely scarless. He also had me scratch his back once, and no scars on his back either. Stepped on an IED? A KII. We also worked in a place frequented by tourists often, and depending on the customer, he would put on a stupid accent. Usually European customers would get greeted and helped with a god-awful German accent. He's American and this accent developed over the course of maybe 3 months. Eventually he used it permanently on co-workers too. He claimed his mother was German and his father Spanish and claimed he could speak both languages. We never once heard him speak those languages, even when tourists asked him to. He did actually have family from Spain and they came to visit once. They were running circles around this man in Spanish and he couldn't say a word. He also claimed to have been a grad student at BU. One of our managers interviewed him for a position when he was first looking for a job, but you needed a college degree for that position, so he was given a brand rep position. He would then frequently forget that said manager knew he wasn't a college grad, and would talk to her, and the rest of us, about his studies as a grad student. A coworker was actually a grad student at BU and he was able to confirm no one with Mike's full name was enrolled in any BU grad program. He invited a coworker to his huge birthday party once. BC she was single and he apparently had a ton of hot military friends. It was gonna be huge and at the penthouse apartment at the top of the newly built skyscraper in our city, owned by his best friend. Open bar. Some of his famous friends from Spain were going to be there. Our co-worker spent 3 hours walking around the city texting him, calling him, getting no response. She goes to the building and says she's there for Mike's party, assuming they'd know if something so huge was going on. They had no idea what she was talking about. The penthouse apartment at the top of the building was owned by an Asian tech millionaire who wasn't in the country at the moment. Mike never showed up to work again after he lied about the party. Never spoke to any of us again and just disappeared. I miss his drama sometimes when my life feels dull. TL. DR had a co-worker who compulsively lied about having stepped on an IED, had no scars anywhere, being foreign, created a fake accent after we already knew him, being a grad student. Our manager had to reject him for a position that required a college degree, and throwing a huge penthouse party. Co-worker showed up and the concierge had no idea who or what event she was talking about. I had a friend in high school who tried convincing me he was a werewolf. He'd call me at night and talk about these blood bars he would go to that had all sorts of mythical creatures like vampires and witches and warlocks and stuff. He told me stories about his myth creature friends, and on full moons, he would pretend to transform by howling and growling and suddenly dropping the phone. No one ever took him seriously but he didn't stop trying, which made it really awkward. My coworker, every morning just a slew of absolute BS from her mouth while in the break room. These are just some I remember. Claims she assists a vet office around the corner from her house with placing breathing tubes on animals. A doctor we work with put the gloves on her while on his yacht. This is a 65-year-old woman. Hung out with Sandra Bullock while in Texas. The list goes on. One of my co-workers is a pathological lying psychopath. Homes he doesn't own. Sexual conquests. Money. He tends to mimic the biggest personality in the room for attention. You tell him about your hiking trip, he has a hiking story too or something to one-up you. It's exhausting to deal with. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.